The self-serve. A close friend, my first child's godfather, my vacation buddy, and a highly sought-after essayist and public speaker. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Williams. She was seated at a table that looked a lot like the one Charlie Rose had used for his PBS program over the years. She took over as his replacement when he returned to commercial television, adding her own unique style to the show. Joe occupied the seat across from her. This particular broadcast was unique. It was live, in the Mountain State Auditorium, a short drive from his house, rather than in a studio. The school benefited from it. It was crammed full. Before the university tightened its regulations, tickets had actually been sold for 3 or 4 times their original price. Well, Joe, to quote Yogi Berra, it's deja vu all over again. He grinned pitifully and cracked a little joke. Yes, Babs, this isn't how we should be meeting anymore. How is Mike doing? Always with me. It was strange being a first-time father, but he became aware of it quickly. He appeared almost bored when our third child arrived. He does, however, love us just as much as we do. Life is good right now. I'm glad for you. Thanks. She held back. She was excited to begin an interview for the first time in her life. She knew this man as a friend, and the agony he'd experienced lately was nearly unbearable. He had become quieter and less likely to smile. Her thoughts were with him. Before we start talking about your latest book, give us an update on the Annie Foundation. He grinned, content with the topic. Recall that it all began with the original group matching. The website came first, followed by the blog. It had grown into something much more before we realized it. Jane and Anne realized it had gotten out of hand when more women began to join. They transformed it into a foundation that assisted any needy woman, not just members. They continue to manage it with expert assistance. I can't say enough positive things about them. Babs cited a list. Medical clinics for women, business loans similar to the African microloans program, scholarships, the list is endless, and 6537. You are aware that I am a member. I'm a member of the Regional Advisory Board as well. I also served as Wendy Thomas' mentor, Annie 499. She holds an associate's degree and currently oversees Apex's quality control division. She has only ever worked there. She claims to owe you her entire life. Joe reddened a little. I believe she slightly exaggerates my contribution. She was and still is a strong young lady who eventually would have succeeded in some endeavor. Joe, you can never persuade her of that. I'm positive that your writing and public appearances have had a significant impact on a number of lives. Mine was altered by you. Please, Babs, this is getting embarrassing. Sorry. She hesitated, then jumped. So, Joe, I am aware that you have steadfastly declined interviews to talk about your most recent book. You declined to participate in any of the publicity duties that authors typically perform in conjunction with the publication of a new book. In spite of this, it went on to become a bestseller and captivate readers everywhere. Why with me, and why now? Because I have faith in you and I know you. You excel at posing insightful queries and obtaining surprising responses. That must be the reason CBS pursued you. Plus, being on PBS allows me the time to do it justice, instead of condensing it down to a 5-minute soundbite. Thanks, but this time before I start asking, why don't you give us the reasons why you wrote the book and how it came about? He thought, this is going to be really difficult, but I have to do this right. He had to be as public as possible for the sake of his soul, since private apologies don't have the same impact as public ones. That was what he owed her. Babs, I don't know if you're old enough to recall him, but Paul Harvey used to be a great radio pundit. Is the rest of the story commentary pieces, in which he delves deeper into the backstory of well-known figures or hot-button issues, helped make him famous. They were perceptive and offered a fresh perspective on the subject or tale. My book on Paul Harvey is this one. Here's the remainder of the tale. The narrative of Annie. He closed his eyes for a moment, going over the past 2 years of his life. Then he began to tell his story. Maria was seated at the kitchen table when I arrived home. She seemed to have shed tears. It was the kids that came to mind first. As something occurred. With Bunny and 2 boys, Ajay now had 3. At 13 years old, she was starting to manifest the traits of the future woman. Mickey was a Chicago-based attorney. Tony played baseball professionally in the AAA League. He and I both knew that he would never play in the major leagues and that, come wintertime, he would put his engineering degree to use. After graduating, Tina worked as a teacher in Grant City, the twins' hometown, while Cassie remained nearby and secured a high-tech job in the area. They had left the twin mentality behind, having attended different colleges. Tina was expecting her first child after marrying a boy from the area. Honey, what's wrong? Are the children doing okay? They are all right. Rio sent you a package today. Rio, similar to Brazil. Who are we familiar with there? The tears began to fall. Annie, she had slipped my mind for years. With Maria and the children's assistance, the agony gradually subsided. The last time I'd seen her, she had declined to talk to me, so I decided to end things there. We had relocated to North Carolina's mountains. Tony was accepted to Mountain State on a baseball scholarship. We moved down with him and became enamored with the neighborhood. As a southern boy, I detested the winters and liked the people in the Chicago area just fine. The North Carolina mountains had enough of a winter to suit the family and were far enough south to satisfy me. We were taking the typical tourist route while driving. The house caught our attention while traveling down a side road. Big, white, two-story building. Built during a period when having a large family was the norm, this farmhouse is typical of the era. Although it was somewhat dilapidated, the structure was sound. There was a real estate sign in front of it. For sale, including acres. I pulled into the driveway without talking to Maria. Why are we stopping? Curiosity. The twins were with us, and Tony was getting used to living in his dorm and enjoying college life. Maria was feeling down. All that was left were the twins, and in a few years our nest would be empty. Maria was pretty disturbed by this. As I walked out back, I was convinced. The home overlooked a small valley from its location just below a ridge. A 20-foot-tall small waterfall at the summit gave way to a sizable creek that ran through the middle and was joined by 3 smaller streams en route. A tiny log cabin was just barely visible on the other ridge, almost exactly opposite the house. I decided to do that. Even I wanted this house if I couldn't live here. Maria was enthralled with the view as well, and we decided that it would make a lovely vacation house with a little work. We were taken aback when the realtor informed us that the house included 340 acres in the valley. The house and a few acres will do. Can we divide that apart from the remainder of the land? It cannot be divided, sorry. Since the entire valley is regarded as a floodplain, no buildings are permitted there. It's useful for pasture and timber, that's about it. It's still a portion of the original 1840 homestead. However, the realtor added, it's not worth much because it's floodplain. In addition, the owners should be open to negotiations because the property has been on the market for a while. Although we paid 2/3 the asking price, we still received more than we had desired. The home featured 3 fireplaces, one of which was in the kitchen, and 12 rooms overall. Fortunately, the house was recently built enough to be exempt from historical property laws, allowing for a floor-to-ceiling remodel. While the house was being built, we rented a condo, and when it was finished, we made the decision to move in permanently. When it was finished, the house was stunning. A spread featuring images of the home and the state's newest celebrity couple was published in my state magazine. There, the twins completed their final year of high school. Because they were wealthy Yankees, they were mercilessly teased. But everyone was soon won over by their intelligence, charm, and beauty. Many a young boy from the South thought seriously about stepping over the Mason-Dixon line. We became a part of the community. When I started gardening, I discovered how much I loved it. Just to stay busy, Maria joined a number of civic organizations. She got to know and became friends with the wives of retired college dean and popular writer Wilson through one of the charities she worked with. We would eventually be thrown together. He was a peculiar man. Fully independent, he had ascended from extremely lowly origins. He had lived with his wife and another woman while in college, and the two had reconciled after a 30-year break. She was openly residing with them as their lover and second wife. He persuaded me to give a couple guest lectures and pen an article or two for the community newspaper. I did semi-regular writing for the Wall Street Journal and the New Yorker, and I gave speaking engagements once or twice a month. They paid me absurdly high fees, of which I obediently gave half to the Annie Foundation. Maria was in her middle 50s, and I was in my early 60s. We had both suffered from the passage of time. Her magnificent bust had given in to the forces of gravity and time, and we were both heavier. Nevertheless, I was still excited every time I saw them. When we received the package, we were happy, and I was content to fade away in silence. She'd begged Maria to watch the DVD she'd included in a long letter she'd written, which she never shared with me. All of the pain surged back. After more than a decade and a half, she still wishes to communicate. I'm not sure if I'm drawn in. She dabbed at her tears. Joe, I believe you should listen to what she has to say. You can stop if it starts to bother you too much. I slipped in the DVD and pressed play, dreading it. She was seated in the partial shade of a patio. With the kerchief wrapped around her head, she resembled the woman I had seen in Spain. Her mouth was grin-filled. Hi, Joe. Right now, I would give anything to see your face. I hope Maria is taking good care of you and that you are in good health. Don't worry, I won't turn speaking with you into a routine. But I should tell you a few things and apologize. It's time, no, long overdue. She gave a sniff. Gosh, I thought that after all these years, this would be simpler. Okay, so here we go. Joe, I apologize more than you can ever know. I left you in a cold manner. Better was due to you. Even though I've read your books and listened to your interviews, I can't even begin to imagine the hurt and resentment I caused you. Bear with me now, you may not like what I tell you, but it has to be said. She hung her head and then turned to face the camera. Joe, you're so annoying. I'm sorry you didn't love me enough to hang on to me. It was best if you had followed me. I would not have packed if you had appeared in Spain shortly after my departure and ordered me to quit this ridiculous behavior and return home. Even up until the divorce, I would have been happy to come home and ask for your forgiveness. After that, I thought, oh well, I'm over her. Allow me to explain my departure. Although it will hurt, you might be able to hold on to Maria as a result. I thought you had stopped loving me, so I left. Now I know better, but not back then. Up until Ajay grew up and I was left on my own, I was fine. You were present, you were simply not focusing. I cherished the short trips I went on while Ajay was at home. After she left, I had made a few friends who shared my interests, but the trips weren't as enjoyable. I should have had you along to share the experience with me. However, you detested traveling, so you abandoned me unguarded. You advised taking up a hobby when I was moping around, trying to get you to spend more time with me. I took that as a don't bother me and didn't. Ramon was in the right place at the right time, and I was lonely. He was opportunistic, but I don't think he was a predator. He gave me the information I wanted to hear, that I was appealing. I went to bed with him. I tried to get you to save me by giving you all kinds of signs, but you disregarded me as usual. I therefore departed. I was forced to make a bad decision. Her eyes blazed as she gazed into the camera. Joe, you've broken me 3 times. The first was when you disregarded me and made me question my own value. I broke up with Ramon quite early. We simply didn't have much in common when it came down to it. In addition, he believed that we would lead easy and luxurious lives. It was the beginning of the end for us when I told him I was going to invest the majority of my money and we would need to find employment. Recall how I complained at the end about having headaches? Most likely not. In Spain, things grew worse. I went to the doctors once I fulfilled the residency requirements. I had early onset menopause, it turned out. The largest finding, though, was the brain tumor. Although it wasn't cancerous, it was expanding and pressing on the area of my brain that is responsible for reasoning and decision-making. I wasn't making the best decisions for my life because of your disregard for me. Menopause's overpowering hormones, and a brain tumor. A cosmic collision with devastating effects. I obviously made it through the procedure. Ramon stayed by my side until I got better and then he left. I started feeling better, more in balance, the moment your GODDAMNED book came out. You were successful in ruining me once more. I had to leave my job as a tour guide because they were using me as a tourist attraction. If my photo hadn't been on the cover, things wouldn't have been as horrible. Since you didn't have permission, I ought to have sued you. I considered it, but pride prevented me from doing so because I would seem like the whiny ex-wife trying to take advantage of your success. Thus, I moved and quit my job. For the same reason, I turned down an invitation to participate in some interviews. You were already being referred to as Saint Joe the Wronged by then, so no matter how I phrased it, it would still come across as a petty attempt at retaliation. After watching a couple of your interviews, it was clear to me that you were beginning to trust the media. I decided to swallow it. You destroyed me the 3rd time by showing up out of the blue after years of silence. You don't know how many times I cried in my bed at night wishing I could see you, talk to you just one more time. What do, then? Like a thief, creep up behind me and disparage what little was left of me. I cherished painting. Although I was aware of my shortcomings, it served as therapy and helped me forget my sad life for a short while. I was speechless, so shocked and hurt. You never stopped telling me how much of a bad person I was for not paying attention to my daughter and boasting about how much better your life was now that I was gone. I was afraid I was going to pass out. You were gone by the time I was well enough to talk. She started crying uncontrollably. In Spanish, I heard someone ask her a question. She calmed herself and shook her head. I never even cracked open the package. I tried to make amends and see my child and grandchild as soon as I could, and since the hotel address was on it, I headed there. You are aware that the patio is surrounded by a wall for visitor privacy. I watched Ajay walk over to a table with Bunny. I was ready to pass through the side entrance. I was about to turn around because it was locked when I heard Bunny speaking. It was the first thing she ever said to me. I chose to give her voice a brief listen in order to simply enjoy the sound of her voice. I feel that her speech cadence and mine are pretty similar. Her words ripped through me like a knife. Nana, why is mommy crying? Baby, she received some unfavorable news. She recently learned that something she really wanted is not going to happen, and this is causing her great sadness. Let's kiss her and make it better. That's a good idea, child. Here, help me. I heard some sobbing and the sounds of kissing. My heart broke again when Ajay spoke. Thank you, Mom and Baby. It's exactly what I needed. I'm going to lay down for a bit. Mind your grandmother, Bunny, right now. I will, Mommy. Nana, can we go to the beach? A little while from now. All right, let's get Mommy up to her room and get her settled in. All right, come on, Mommy. I'll tuck you in and kiss your tears away with Nana. There it was, then. My family had completely forgotten about me. There was absolutely nothing left for me. I returned to my apartment, packed up what little I had, and headed out. The following day, I stopped on my way out of town and dropped off the packet for you. I was unable to open it because I was too hurt to see something that was no longer mine. I visited Italy. I was still miserable even though it was nice. When I met Carlos, I was on the verge of giving up. Joe, he's very similar to you in that he views me as the center of his universe. I accompany him on business trips. It's never even brought up. I was translating for him while he was in Italy for business. We had a discreet courtship and then got married because we clicked. Once, I asked him why he was treating me so well. He claimed that he had erred in choosing his first wife, and a wise businessman would never commit the same error twice. He added that until he read a book written by an American. he was unable to comprehend his own errors. Could you guess what book it was? You see, Joe, you saved me after you destroyed me 3 times. I filled him in on everything. He was not at all fond of this idea, I must say. His love for me alone made it possible. I adore living in Rio in my current life. We live in great comfort, and Carlos is doing pretty well. And I adore my location, particularly the ocean. I thus achieved my goal in the end. Take a trip with my beloved, a stunning house, and a family. Carlos has 12 grandchildren, 3 daughters, and 5 sons who all reside nearby. It appears that they all adore their gringo grandmother. This has worn me down a lot, Joe, so I'm about done. I really only wanted to apologize for hurting you. I am aware that you didn't intend to harm me during all those years. Events and coincidences were the only factors. And in the end, you had a really nice life. 3 grandchildren have arrived so far, and there are 5 children. There will undoubtedly be a lot more. Joe, you should love them all. Especially love Maria as much as she loves you. Finally, I bet you're wondering why I decided to tell you these things now. She was taking off her kerchief, revealing an unsightly scar and a partially shaved head. The tumor has come back, and it is cancerous this time. I have a month or so, maybe a little longer. I thus request a favor that I have no right to demand. Please come visit me, even for a short while. I want to be held in your arms by you again. Joe, I've always loved you. Until the day I die, a piece of me will. Please. Removing the kerchief from her head, she did so. If you decide not to come, this is goodbye. The screen went blank and she bowed her head, her shoulders trembling. I got up and stumbled out into the outside world, my vision still blurry from my tears. I needed some time to myself. I located the bench we'd set up beneath a willow tree and took in the view of the valley. I found the scene to be both consoling and depressing. I had done some homework beforehand. The valley and the ones around it were once peppered with farms and homesteads in the late 1860s. In my valley, there had been 16 families, a small trading post, and a church. It would take 20 years for my house to be constructed. Because he could see the signs of previous floods, Mr. Wilcox, the owner of the remaining cabin, had advised the neighbors to build on higher ground. They mocked, claiming that the dam would regulate the water and that there would never be another flood of that magnitude because there was a gristmill in the valley above. Then, on an April day in 1869, it began to rain heavily. It continued nonstop for 2 days. Just one neighbor reacted when Mr. Wilcox and his family attempted to move the nearest neighbors to higher ground. The others were too terrified to abandon their crops and livestock. According to survivors, the dam broke at 2 in the morning. The cabin on the ridge was the only one still standing by sunlight. 19 children and 27 adults were washed away. 6 bodies were discovered, tucked between tree branches here and there. The few chimneys that remained standing and the occasional board or log wedged between trees and rocks were the only reminders that there had once been a community there. Even now, Mr. Wilcox's descendants visit once or twice a summer. I obtained a 60-foot easement and had the cabin and 3 acres designated as historic property. You can only enter on foot, by horseback, or with an ATV. After 3 years of searching, they still haven't located the small church or the neighborhood cemetery. I felt that way right now. All proof that I was a decent person washed away and replaced with boards and debris in my mind. He started crying by the time he finished describing the DVD in that section. Babs broke down in tears. She had never heard anything so poignant. She took the chance to request a brief intermission. After going backstage to wipe their eyes, the makeup artist redrew their faces to compensate for the bright lighting. Don't worry, Joe, we'll edit the last few minutes out. He gave the entire crew a stern look. It's not going to happen. I'll never come back here if it's not in there. It deserves to be. The director was trying not to smile, but Babs was in awe. It should stand because it was the most dramatic and heartfelt thing he had ever taped. After an hour or so of being by myself, Maria came out and sat next to me. She remained silent. Once more, I lost it. I pleaded with her to reassure me that I was still a decent person, that I deserved the love I had received, and that I wouldn't burn in hell for treating Annie badly. You are deserving, of course. Just now, you were reminded that you are fallible like everyone else. Ultimately, it's equally your fault and hers. Notwithstanding her statements, she had the opportunity to speak up at any moment, either before or after she departed. She put her arms around me in a guarded manner. I will always love you, even now. And even if your greatest wish is for me to just shut up, I can assure you that I will never stop talking to you. I'm happy I got you, but I'm sorry about Annie. More than any man I have ever met, including the biological father of the children, I have loved you. At last, I stopped crying. So, do you think I should go? I asked her once I had total emotional control. She gave a nod. I'll set everything up tomorrow. I don't think you have time to waste, and you both need this. After 3 days, we boarded a plane to Rio. Would you describe the meeting for us, Joe? Babs held her breath. Since she was his friend, she was aware of the profound emotional impact it had on him. When he approached her about conducting the interview, she inquired as to whether there was anything she was not permitted to ask. He said, "Do what you always do. You'll know and be able to move on if I choose not to respond." It was very strong. I'm glad I arrived at the right time because she was very weak and only lived for 3 more weeks. Carlos turned out to be a very nice man. He was very much unhappy that I was there, but how can you refuse your dying wife? He had become much friendlier by the end of the day. I spent the most of my 30 minutes with her just holding her. I'll never repeat what she said because she was too weak to say much and it was meant only for my ears. We sobbed and expressed regret to one another. We made peace with each other, finally. When I emerged from the bedroom, I was shocked to see Carlos sobbing uncontrollably in Maria's arms. His wife was dying, of course. Once more, I was too consumed with meeting my own needs to think about anyone else. He had only spoken Spanish since I met him, so I assumed he had no English. I approached him and asked Maria to do the translating. Mr. Soto, I understand how challenging what you did was. I appreciate you taking the time to do it. Additionally, I want to thank you for being the man I should have been and for being the man you are. I'm happy that she found you and had a happy final years. It was due to her, and I sincerely apologize for your impending loss. He was observing me closely as I talked. He held out his hand, and I shook it as I turned to go. I appreciate you being here, Mr. Williams. It was very important to her. I understand why she fell in love with you and how, in spite of everything, she continued to love you. Without her, I will be lost and alone, but my large family will definitely support me. Strange as it may sound, I'm grateful that you wrote the book because it helped me see the areas in which my first attempt was flawed and Annie benefited from it. I gave the situation a lot of thought once I got home. I informed Jane and Anne over the phone about my situation and requested a favor. I was going to use their blog as a platform for my farewell and apology to Annie. When I finished and posted it, thanks to the emails they sent out to all the members, the system crashed regularly for 10 days on account of the overload. Babs said something. I know it was part apology and part eulogy, but wasn't it the basis for the book? He let out a deep sigh. A book was never intended to be written. However, the response was so great that I received a call from my former publisher offering me a deal. I concurred. I wanted to finish the blog because I felt like I hadn't said enough. You are aware of my agreement. I'm not interested in promotions or public appearances. No interviews, other than this one, naturally. I seemed surprised that anything I write gets read, but I wasn't surprised by the response it received. With just 180 pages, it was a little book. I've heard that the original film's creators requested the rights. Is a movie scheduled for release soon? Not during my lifetime. The kids are free to choose to leave it on when I'm not around, but I would prefer if they didn't. She is worthy of a peaceful rest. To be honest, I'm relieved she passed so she wouldn't have to deal with this again. I must admit that despite its briefness, the message was extremely impactful. You were brutally honest when you acknowledged that you had a hand in your marriage failing. Babs, I had to let it out. I condemned her with silence rather than meek praise. I'm relieved she clarified her side of the issue. Joe, time is running out. Any last pearls of wisdom? Not unless you hear it from an ignorant person. If anything, these past 2 years have taught me that I still don't know. I'm shocked Maria is still with me. My deepest desire is that after reading any of the foolish mess I've spouted over the last decade and a half someone saves a relationship or a marriage, it will have been worth it. Okay, Joe, good night. As usual, it was really fascinating and enjoyable. Good night, Babs. Please give the kids a kiss from me, and let Mike know that I make mistakes. Of that, my dear Joe, you can be assured. This is Barbara from Mountain State University's auditorium. We appreciate your support public television and ask that you please remember to donate during pledge months. Your financial support is what keeps us going. Good night to all of you. Removing her microphone, she gave Joe a hug. Joe was 68 years old when he was killed in an automobile accident. His 5 children and 8 grandchildren all mourned his passing. At the hospital, he lived long enough to tell Maria he loved her again. Before she died, Maria lived for a further 14 years. She had her fair share of men who expressed fleeting interest in her because she was a wealthy and attractive widow. When one especially attractive man rejected her advances, she became irate. Maria, I'm not sure what you're searching for. I'm not sure if I can fulfill your expectations. Her response was simple but elegant. They made me the only Joe, and he's gone, but I want an average Joe. Nothing is able to take his place. Her loss was felt by all of her children, including Ajay, her 17 grandchildren, and her 2 great-grandchildren. In case you were wondering, Annie begged for forgiveness and sent Ajay a DVD at the same time she sent Joe his. After flying down, she spent 3 days with Bunny. She kept it to herself. I'm not sure what you were hoping for, but this is what you received. Had I set her on fire? Perhaps. Ultimately, I chose to let it end the way real life does, despite how chaotic that can occasionally be. Until the next occasion, comment. You guys like a story like this where it talks about the past? Or you like modern time relationship stories only? Comment down below, sub and bell, and I will work on the next one.